excellent short biography. She was not aware of those letters.
That's a shame, yeah.
when she refers to the to the Four Masters. But there it is, as I say. What did I say? 34 pages. It's quite a good footnote to get, isn't it? But that really has been that means, and that's why I said in the foreword to this new book that the genealogy of the Clann cattle, or particularly, but anyway, all O'Donovans in the senior line, in which were all the chiefs, is uniquely well documented. And as I say, I hope that nobody will be able to turn it out, but I very much doubt that they will. So I think that really is, in a kind of a few brief words, and I hope most of them are accurate at any rate, will give you some idea of the importance of Dr. John O'Donovan to our clan, and indeed Miriam O'Donovan in her letter, he says that, she says that really it's been her inspiration in writing this clan history.
Very good.
So that's about it, I think.
Yeah,
all right?
Perfect, Daniel. That's
Good.
been magic.
All right.
I often, sometimes when I'm up at Bradley House and I read, it's quite a responsibility as well.
Yeah. Hope the information was accurate, and nice to see you.
No worries.
All right, Ty.
Okay.
Good. Right, bye now.
Okay, we're here in the home of Jack and Angela O'Brien, here in Castleview, overlooking the castle and Castle Donovan. We want to introduce now John Emmett. And John, you've been involved here in this clan gathering. What inspired you to begin it?
My first inspiration was my visit here to Castle Donovan in the spring of 1959. A friend of mine, a de Courcy from Kinsale, and I were going back home to the States after 2 difficult years as Marine lieutenants in Southeast Asia. And we were confused and ready to stop that sort of experience and go back home. We came through Ireland, and we came here to Castle Donovan. We went to the stores. We were interested in the military aspects of why a castle here. What's the background of this place? And it jumps out at you. From this spot where the castle sits, if you go over the hill to the north, you're immediately in the valley of the Bandon River and can go downstream to the sea along the river. If you went over one more short range of hills, you would be near Goghanbarra in the valley of the Lee, and you could traverse the river all the way to Cork City. If you went over the hill to the west, you would be in the watershed of Bantry Bay, which is another ideal port. If you stepped out from the castle, you would immediately be in the very origin of the Illan River, which flows south into Roaring Water Bay. It has the added advantage of having a rather marshy type land around a good portion of the base, which would make attack very difficult. In addition, they had an excellent source of fresh water immediately. And Drew and I came, and we decided to stay a while. In fact, we thought we'd spend the evening up there. And we took with us a nice supper. He took a bottle of Patty's, and I took a bottle of Jameson, and up we climbed to the top. And we stayed too long, and we had too much lunch. And at the time it got dark, we decided we better stay for the night because there was no way to get down safely. We stayed the night up there and saw the sun rise. And from that experience, that would have been probably March of '59, 42 years ago, I decided what a beautiful, wonderful place, and I hope that someday Donovans from all over the world can come home and see it. And that was the beginning. The reality is that I went back to the States, as Drew did, and we went our ways through life. I met the perfect girl, got married, raised a family, and went on from there. Then in the 70s, we began to come back gradually, and we knew that shortly our children would be on their own, and we could commence with some sort of reunion. 6 years ago, Virginia and I started, and 2 years later, through meeting Dan, Tim, Cathal, we began to, in our own individual ways, to see if we could excite people about it. And it was no difficulty at all. And it's Castle Donovan that's the focal point of our homelands.
Good, thanks. Just so, John, what was it that warmed you to this area?
We came down in the morning, and it was raining like it is now. You can probably hear the drip drip off the roof here. And it was wet, and we were wet. And the man on your immediate right, Jackie O'Brien, invited us into his home and gave us breakfast. And the breakfast was nice. But much nicer was the warmth that we got from his family. We knew that we were once again back where we were welcome. We didn't have to prove anything. We had nothing to offer this man, and he had everything to offer us that we needed. We needed to be accepted. We needed to be welcomed. And that welcome was so evident to us that it set the stage for meeting hundreds like him. John Joe on my left, who lives down the road a mile or two. The same warmth, the same personality permeates the area. This is a perfect place for a reunion for a family that comes from here.
Thank you.
Before we go, we want to ask everybody here to sign the banner. This is what we use in the States at gatherings of the Irish to attract them to the O'Donovan banner. And we had it nice and perfectly white and green for a while, but we decided that we were going to bring it to the reunion, have people from all over the world sign it, both sides, right side up, upside down. It's pretty blank now, but in a day or two, we hope to have hundreds of names on here, and then we're going to take it to Limerick and put it in a time capsule and bury it, and 50 years from now, when we have another reunion, the children and the grandchildren of those who signed can find their names.
Very good.
Now we got to get you to sign it.
The first person that signed it was a Donovan from Argentina.
Oh, I should have. Well,
That's okay.
that's...
Well, I mean, that's more encompassing.
Worldwide. Worldwide. Well, we've just come from the Jeannie Johnson, which we've seen out there in Phoenix, and we're here in the Visitor Centre in Blinderville. Helen O'Carroll has given us a time to tell us about the connection with the Donovan. What's the connection?
Well, the Donovan family in Tralee actually owned the original Jeannie Johnston, and the ship was owned by the firm of John Donovan and Sons, and John Donovan had set up the firm in the late 18th century, early 19th century. Now we're not 100% clear where he originally came from. His wife was a woman called Mary Galway, and she was from Skibbereen. So, given that Donovan is a West Cork name, the likelihood is that he came from West Cork himself. Although a local historian here in town told me once that he'd heard a story that John Donovan had come from Killarney, that he'd been a miller in Killarney, but I haven't substantiated that yet. So John Donovan set up the firm there, as I say, in the early 19th century, and he really had the firm well established by the mid-19th century, by the 1840s. And he had started chartering ships in the 1820s and 1830s. Basically, the reason why he started chartering transatlantic ships was to bring a cargo of timber back from Quebec, which then was one of the biggest centres for timber exportation to Britain and Ireland. So he'd charter a ship, send it over to Quebec to pick up the cargo of timber, bring the timber back. So instead of sending a ship out empty, he started taking passengers on these charter ships. And there was another firm in town doing the same thing, a firm called Hickson's. The Hickson's actually owned the ships that they were sending out. The Donovans never actually owned a transatlantic going ship until the Ginny Johnston, and they bought that in late 1847, early 1848. And they basically used it as, a passenger vessel bringing immigrants over to predominantly Quebec, and then bringing the timber back. And what would happen would be that they'd take passengers on in April, usually around early April, and they'd sail out of Tralee mid-April, late April, go over to Quebec, take the passengers off, clear the steerage deck, break it down, and then have this big long hold for the huge square timbers coming back from Quebec. So that, they'd have a very quick turnover in Quebec, so that they'd come back, unload the timber, then build up the steerage deck again, and then leave Tralee, be ready to leave Tralee around the middle of August. Never really, the latest they would have left it would have been early September. Again with passengers, the same thing happened again.
So in a year, how often would they have made the trips?
Twice a year to North America. And then
they take out the passengers, bring back the timber.
Yeah.
Take out the passengers, bring back the timber.
Exactly, yeah.
And then again in the spring.
Yeah, but what they tended to do on the way back in the autumn winter, they'd make it out of the St. Lawrence before the river iced up, and then what they would do is either go to Liverpool on the way back to Tralee, or Liverpool, Cardiff, went to Waterford once, Cork often as well. And the reason for that was to either they'd sell some of the cargo of timber in places like that, or pick up more cargo for Tralee, or else let off the crew. I mean, like in a bigger port, you have more variety of, greater choice of crew members, or the crew would rather be left off in a bigger port where they'd get they had a better chance of getting another ship, rather than Tralee would have been a relatively small port, So, and then they'd come back to Tralee, and then the captain would have a well-earned rest, and the ship would need to lay up as well,
Right.
and do some repairs, because, you take a fair bit of a battery in the ocean,
Right, very good. So what did the boat cost, the ship cost originally?
Well, originally, the way they'd work out the price originally was per ton, and the price would vary, Typically in this period it would go between about £5 maybe to about £10, but roughly around the time that the original ship was built, it was kind of averaging at around £6. So £6 per ton, and the original ship weighed about 408 tons, so if you work out the maths there. So we're talking really roughly between £2,000 £3,000, maybe a little bit more to build. That was the cost to build the ship then, and that would have been roughly around the cost that the Donovans would have paid for it. The current project is a little bit more than that. It's between about £4 and £5 million, which comes from a variety of different sources,
Okay. Which the Nicholas Donovan, who was Nicholas Donovan?
Well, Nicholas Donovan was one of the elder sons of John Donovan. There was an older son, but it seems likely that he died young. And Nicholas Donovan was the eldest one, the first one to get involved in the business with the father, and then the younger brothers did as well. And he was married to Catherine Murphy, who was of the Murphy Brewery family, and they were very closely connected. And it seems likely as well that the Donovans put some money when the brewery was being set up, as distinct from the distillery now, that the Donovans would have put some money into the brewery as well. So they were very, very closely connected and went to each other's funerals and that. And they as well, like the family. Both families were very strong supporters of the O'Connells, and that they were quite alike really in a number of different ways as well. I should point out as well about just to get back to the ship, the original ship as well would have taken about 6 months to build, because the man who built it, a man called John Munn, he was one of the biggest shipbuilders in Quebec. So he actually had 2 shipyards going at the one time. So he averaged about 4 ships per year. He would. He could have 2 ships on the go at the one time.
Where did he build them?
In Quebec City.
This is in Canada?
Yeah. Just at the, at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River. Not at the mouth, but where it comes down, right down, just where it begins to narrow there. It's Quebec City. And it was in the mid-19th century, it was, in North America, it was a very big shipbuilding centre, and I should point out as well that Henry Donovan, Nicholas Donovan's younger brother, he married a woman called Kathleen Morris, whose father was from Newfoundland. He was one of the he was one of the big sort of politicians in Newfoundland. He was also very influential in founding the Brompton Oratory, which Cardinal Newman founded in London. And Henry Donovan was knighted for his efforts to get the pier built at Phoenix, which is where the ship is now. So it's a nice connection.
Turnaround.
Yeah. He was. He wasn't the only one who got the pier built, but he was the one of the sort of the stalwarts in getting it done. So it's a nice connection now to have the ship down at Phoenix at the moment, which wouldn't have been built without the efforts of Henry Donovan.
Right. So Helen, what was the life of the boat?
Well, it lasted about 11 years, which isn't that unusual for a ship like this, because they built them fast and, really, there's an expression for it which I won't use, but they'd really use them a lot,
Yeah.
And because that's what they were, they weren't intended for a very long life. So what happened to the ship was, the Donovans sold it in 1855, towards the end of 1855, because it was no longer, legislation had become tighter, it was no longer as easy to bring emigrants on what was essentially a cargo vessel. And also the timber trade was going through a bit of a slump, so for various reasons they decided to get out of owning a transatlantic sailing ship. They sold it to a man, ironically called Johnson, in North Shields in England, and it was used then as a cargo vessel only for the next 2 years, sailing between the north of England, south of Spain, over to Quebec and back in this kind of triangular run for about 2 years of really, intensive work. And what happened was in October of 1858, they were coming back from Quebec with the cargo. It was just a cargo, there was no passengers on board. And they had, besides the cargo of timber in the hold, they had some on deck as well. And what happened was that the timber started getting waterlogged. And so, it took on more and more water. So the timber ended up weighing more than the ship. So instead of as the kids think with Titanic, of it going down like that, it just sank lower and lower in the water. So what happened was that the crew started climbing higher and higher up the mast, So they hung on to the mainmast for about 9 days before they were picked up by a passing ship. They were all picked up and taken safely.
So they were in a traffic lane.
Oh yeah. I mean, it wouldn't have been that unusual at the time, Yeah. That's why they were confident enough that if they clung on long enough that someone would pass by and pick them up, And so they were taken by this ship into New York, all of them safe and sound, and the Jeannie Johnston was left to sink in the middle of the Atlantic the end of October 1858, and that was the end of her until the keel was laid here in 98.
What brought about the whole resurrection of the idea to build the ship again?
Well, it's kind of a complicated process, really. It really was born out of a number of different projects in both the Tralee and Blenhevel area, going back to the 1980s, which started really with the reconstruction of the windmill here, or the restoration, I should say, of the windmill here in Blenhevel. And arising out of that, there was like a local history project, a Foss-sponsored local history project, and they did some research into the history of Blennerville, which is where the immigrants would have left from on the J.A. Johnston, and the name of the ship kept coming up, because it wasn't the only ship to have left Blennerville, and nor was it the only ship to have taken its passengers safely across the Atlantic. But in that particular period of time, it was the most regular one, in that it left twice a year, almost like clockwork, probably, sticking to a better timetable than a CIE train, you know what I mean?
Careful now.
So when they were doing the local history project, the name kept coming up, and then arising out of, let's say, another project that went on here was the restoration of part of the Tralee-Dingle steam train railway line, and then the genesis of the idea of building a ship here at Blennerville to sort of celebrate or commemorate, I should say, rather than celebrate, commemorate the thousands of immigrants who left Ireland in the famine period, and to commemorate their resilience and courage and bravery, really, in crossing the ocean and on a journey that would have been fairly uncomfortable. Even on a good ship like this, which never lost a passenger, you've got to understand that it's like 45 to 46 days was the average length of time on the ship, and the ship would, on average, took about 200 passengers. It's 200 people. I mean, you saw the ship outside and feel it's not that big.
No, and the weather this evening made me feel it's a cork.
Yeah.
Bobbing about in the water. Oh,
absolutely. And I mean, so that took a lot of courage to go off into the blue unknown like that, not knowing whether you get to the other side or not. And, when we focus on the really miserable stories of the coffin ships, which, are the truth and did happen in that, but we often leave out the fact that for the immigrants who left on ships like this, it was a pretty rough journey as well, so that the whole story of immigration, that particular period, was a rough, tough journey,
There's echoes of the subject of immigration, which we now have people coming to this country, which is sort of a turnaround again, isn't it? In the whole
absolutely
scene.
And some horrific stories as well, this would date our video, but that story of the people from China ending up
in Dover.
In Dover, those kind of stories would have been the currency of the day then, of ships from Ireland arriving in Canada or the United States with, at least 100 dead on board, and another 100 have been thrown over on the way across. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And many more sick and dying. We shouldn't forget that the journey across to the other side was very, very tough. But it makes the achievement of the Irish in America, it makes that story all the greater, really, in a sense. That they did so well for themselves, having come from a fairly traumatic starting point in Ireland.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. How are you? Thanks for all the work you put into this.
Well,
So Dennis is telling me that you've
very
really
well.
done
How
it
do you
tremendously
do?
well.
I remember you.
How are you? How are you? Good to see you
You're looking
indeed.
very well, actually, without beard.
You're definitely looking well without a beard. You have to take a double take, you know.
You do,
and
you do.
Then you realise. Then you realise. So
Okay,
you're in a
then.
very beautiful spot here, aren't you?
It's absolutely gorgeous, as long as the weather holds snow, we'll be all
Ah,
right.
yes, yeah. We'll ignore those grey clouds.
That's right. Well, if the prayers of about 500 O'Donovans have anything to do with it,
They should have an influence.
they should indeed.
They should, yeah.
Are we ready to move down then?
That's grand. We'll do that.
Should be congratulating you, tell you about all the work you put in because
Hello, how are you? Good to see you. Hello. Thanks very much. How are you? Hello. How are you? Hello. How are things? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right, you stay on that side. I'll move round to your other side to give you
Okay.
a guard of honour between the pair of us.
Thank you. Hi there. Hello. How are you? Thank you very much. How are you?
Very well, thanks.
Good.
Am I going to say hello?
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
How are you? Oh, we've already met.
Am I coming to say hello?
Hello.
Bring her up.
Hello, how are you? Good to see you. Oh, we're just...
good and
We're well looked after, exactly. Well looked after.
That'll wreck the thing for
The fortresses were right in the middle of everything.
To the chief of the
How
name.
do you do, Chieftain? How are you?
Very well indeed, ma'am. Thank you.
How are you?
Very
You're
nice
the
to see
chief.
you indeed. Yes, that is right.
You
That's
almost
right.
not recognise Senator Dennis.
I met you last night. I see you didn't know me.
He's
I met you last
recognized
night.
without the beard today.
Because when the urban calls off there, so I'm sure you didn't know me.
Oh, right. No, absolutely right. I
fell off,
didn't.
yeah.
There was that kind of a blank expression on my face. Minister, will you...
But I still enjoy the wine, so.
This is all...
Yes.
Where the East Medical Service will start. The service will
Oh, you can watch. Well, yeah, we have to get back this evening into court.
Yeah, they're only... How
are you?
Nice to see you.
And you indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, how do you do? Oh, Philip Blair, hello. John Philip Blair, how are you? See you. Hello there. How are you?
This is another Donovan.
We're visiting from Boston. Oh, from Boston?
Yes.
Oh, you came the long route. We did.
We took the short cut back.
Hello, how are you? Hello. And you're from West Cork? Oh, yeah, how are you? Yes. All right. Oh, great. How are you? Hello. So you're neighbours? I'm Oh, really? Oh, how are you? And I first of all want to pay my respects to the chief of the Donovan clan and of course to all of you people here, not least the public representatives, and of course we have the only Donovan in your office, my colleague Dennis O'Donovan, sitting behind me here. And can I first of all thank all of you for inviting me along, and to particularly thank your chairperson for today, because I know from Dennis and indeed very many others the tremendous work that has been put into the organisation of the last few days. And obviously it's not very easy to try and coordinate not only people with the Donovan name and O'Donovan name here in Ireland, but indeed to ensure that all of the people right over the world who can claim that particular name and part of the kinship of that clan, to get them all together in one place here in West Cork certainly, as I say, takes a great deal of organisation, and I want to congratulate all of those for bringing us here today, because it's certainly not an easy feat, and I know all of the tremendous work that has been done to make our surroundings here indeed very comfortable. And as I've said, and as has been alluded to by other speakers before me today, that many of you have come from a very far distance. It took me 3 hours to get from Ennis, and indeed it took my colleagues Sheila and Michael 5 hours to get from Dublin. I'm sure that there are many others that can add on very many other hours from coming from such long distances as Australia and Canada. And you have come here to claim what is very much part of your heritage. And as you may have noticed, the title of my own ministry is Arts, Heritage, Graves in the Islands, as the Chief has already said. And certainly the issue with regarding heritage is, of course, can take on a very broad sweep. But those of you who have come here have come to, if you like, claim back that particular heritage of your clan and of your family, and be able to look on, if you like, the symbol that is Castle Donovan here today. And I know, going all through the country, of the importance of our particular national monuments. I know too of the wish of not only the younger people, I'm glad to say, but also the older people in the communities, to ensure that we as a state can do all we can to preserve and conserve the many wonderful monuments we have, and the heritage and the culture that goes with all of that. And I also know, of course, that there is an increasing interest in the whole genealogy, in trying to be in a position to be able to trace your relatives and your friends in an area. And certainly when it comes to trying to trace family roots, I think again this is something that has been updated very much within our national institutions here, not least the National Library and the National Archives. And this will help very many people abroad to be able to trace their own lineage here in Ireland. To further go into their own particular heritage, and this can be done with the help of our own national institutions, not only in Dublin, but indeed we're ensuring that that kind of information comes to a more local base right throughout the country, so that it'll be easier for people to access that when they're visiting other parts of Ireland. But it's really my very great pleasure to come along here this afternoon and to enjoy the festivities here. I know that you have been enjoying the last number of days, and it's really a wonder, especially for our visitors, that they have managed to be able to last the social, I suppose, all the social engagements that you have had over the last while, because in Ireland, as you will know, we're well able to enjoy ourselves. We do work, and we work pretty hard, but we are able to ensure that we're able to mingle that with a sense of enjoyment and a sense of fun. And of course that's very much part of our culture too, and that we have a very inclusive culture, and that is perhaps easily demonstrated by our music, our song and our dance. And I too, along with your chairman today, would like to congratulate the musicians that we have heard, and indeed the dancers that we have seen in their tremendous talents, and been able to give us the pleasure of enjoying their particular skills.
Say Australia. Thank you. Brazil. Angela needs a little help. Can I hear Brazil from everybody? Brazil! Is there a single soul here from Canada? Canada! Hey! Let's do that again. Canada. Canada! We've got somebody here from Colombia. Who's from Colombia? Colombia! Hey! There was a young lady somebody from France?
Yes.
Is he? Hey! Is Germany still here? Is somebody from Germany here? I met somebody yesterday. Hey! Thank you. Germany. All right. We certainly have some people here from Great Britain. Hey! Thank you. This one may not have made it. Is there anybody here from Ireland? Thank you all. And Italy.
Italy.
Hey! Thank you. New Zealand? Is Wayne here? I still owe him something. I'll pay him. Wayne, I've got it in the sack. Is there anyone still here from South Africa? I know there's someone here from the United States, but I want to hear you say America. Thank you. Now, who did I miss? Argentina! Argentina! Hey. Who else? Did I miss anybody else? From the very bottom of my heart. Thank you.
With the name, fellow clansmen and fellow clanswomen. When we gathered here in West Cork in the middle of last week, we were strangers to each other, but now no longer. And to prove that, I want you to turn to the person left and right of you and shake their hands. Now what about behind and in front of you?
Would be so gracious as to accompany me to the other side of the bridge to unveil a memorial plaque. Minister, might I ask you to do us the great honour of unveiling the plaque which we have placed here in honour of your visit to us today.
There we go. No, it's not lovely. It's beautifully done.
It is. Yes.
Reenact us.
Very well.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The people
Thank you.
Hold it there and just
Fall off the platform anyway.
put your hand in it there.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Might I
Lovely touch.
finally, Minister, present you a small token of thanks with a specially bound copy of the short fan history written by Miriam Donovan.
Yes, indeed I have. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you for
Lovely.
coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
How long are you staying over for?
Another 4 days.
Can I invite everybody back, please, so that we can start our entertainment?